We back. We're back with the Rocky 5. I thought that last week I made a joke that like we'd done so many sequels and parts, part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4 of the Gospel of Philip, the portion of the inner and the outer, that we were becoming like the Rocky franchise. And I really did think we were finished last week, but there's more. Wait, there's more. Yeah, I think that I really do think this is the last episode this time. But I was like really shopping around in the Gospel of Philip this afternoon, so I was like kind of really looking forward to the episode tonight. But I just couldn't get these last bits out of my mind. And all of this, these other like synchronistic subjects talking about things that tied into what I wanted to talk about, like came through this week, like in the form of like a podcast and like some other things. And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do one more like grand finale on the inner and the outer, because it also ties into the Christ and the crucifixion. And I always mean to touch on this when we're talking about other things, and I always feel like that's the thing that like slips out of my mind as I'm like going on about something else, and I always mean to talk about this. So this is a great episode to just talk more on this. Now, having said that, I usually don't think about this until I sit down to do it, because inevitably what happens is that as soon as I lend myself as a vessel for this information, it just starts pouring in. And so I'll try to start taking notes or something, but then it's like, it just becomes like the whole video. That's why I'm like, I don't prepare. I just press record and I just begin to channel. So I got into the shower to get ready for work this afternoon, and like all these thoughts about the episode and like about this interview that I've been listening to this girl who was talking about some things to do with like Christ consciousness and things. I was like, oh yeah, that reminds me, I want to talk about the crucifixion. And so as I was listening to this, I'm in the shower and I start thinking about like all of like the things that I want to say in the video. And I was like, oh, I need to, when I get out of the shower, I need to just stop and do a voice note to remind myself later. But then like the voice note just became like the material in and of itself. So I wanted to set that up to let you know that I will be splicing, once we get through our opening monologue here, I'm going to splice in my audio transmission from the bathroom. And you might hear all kinds of like lotion squirting sounds in bottles because I'm doing like my skincare routine and putting on all my moisturizers and things. So yeah, it's gonna be really weird. It's gonna be raw, and it's gonna be, you're in the bathroom with me while I'm like getting ready, like putting on moisturizers. So that's a bit much. So just to prepare you for that, it's gonna be audio. I'm gonna like throw a photo or something over it. I have visual aids this week. I have my map. I have an actual cross. I've got our book. And if anybody is joining for the first time and they're like, what the fuck is going on? Hello, I'm Liz Taylor. I have this daily show that we do. I record it late usually because half the week I'm working at a restaurant at night. But on Saturday nights, we like to do a segment called The Secret Sermons, and we do the secret teachings of Jesus. And basically where that came from is that I wanted to read the Nag Hammadi scriptures and the Gnostic Gospels and like Dead Sea Scrolls and things, and I didn't have time to like squeeze it anywhere. And I thought, well, what a waste if I'm like reading this and thinking like about it by myself. Why not just like do it on camera with all of you? So here we are. We're just having fun. We're reading this. Also, what we've learned from the Kabbalists of days yonder is that the Kabbalist sages believe that it's very powerful to study the scriptures late at night at midnight, because midnight is a very positive time of day. There's a lot of power in that time. It is the liminal space between the end of one day and the beginning of the next. It is also what we call central column energy. So between midnight and dawn is central column energy, which is this area here. This is very positive. This is neutral energy. This is grounded energy. If you think of like electricity, you have your positive charge and your negative charge, and then you have your grounding charge that keeps everything from becoming like, you know, dangerous, and you could electrocute yourself, right? You ground it, right? So when you are bringing these governing forces into balance, right, these opposing forces, you are in the central column here. So midnight to dawn is a very positive time of day because it is in the central column. 6 a.m. or sunrise to noon is also the most positive hours of the day because those are the beginning, the fresh energy. Let's see what else. Why else do we do this at midnight? Well, not only are we opening up, we're in this open portal in time where the veil is thinner and we have access to ground the light that we are receiving in the information so that we can integrate it into our lives. So we're receiving more light through our study than we would normally. And also a benefit of doing it this late, one thing that increases the power of the study is that we are sacrificing the flesh in the spirit of Eucharist, in that we are pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zone to delay instant gratification, to sort of delay satisfying the flesh and practice restriction and push through, you know, and put ourselves, you know, kind of sacrifice ourselves, put ourselves in an uncomfortable physical state in order to push through and persevere. So all of that opens us up for even more enlightenment. And if you're not watching this at midnight, it's okay, because at least some of my midnight energy is getting into the recording. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this portion that we've been talking about for like a month now. It's like our 5th week. And if you want to go back in the vlog section on my channel, I need to, you know what tomorrow I need to do is make a Secret Teachings of Jesus playlist by itself. But the last 4 episodes have been the inner and the outer. And so we've been tackling this from like all different angles and facets. And it's been really fun. And I think it's been really awesome. And then we're rounding it out today with some final thoughts about the actual crucifixion. So I will begin. I will read this and then we will talk about maybe a couple of things, and then I will splice in the audio, and then I'll come back and finish our discussion. The inner and the outer. And then right away, Philip makes a reference to something he said, and he's talking about Jesus as far as like who said what. He's talking about Jesus. For this reason, he said, I have come to make the lower like the upper and the outer like the inner, and to unite them in that place. He spoke here in symbols and images. Those who say there is a heavenly person and one that is higher are wrong. For they call the visible heavenly person lower, and the one to whom the hidden realm belongs higher. It would be better for them to speak of the inner and the outermost. For the Master called corruption the outermost darkness, and there is nothing outside it. He said, my Father who is in secret, he said, go into your room, shut the door behind you, and pray to your Father who is in secret. That is the one who is innermost. What is innermost is the fullness, and there is nothing further within. And this is what they call uppermost. It's interesting too, because yesterday we were talking about, this is right in reach, this particular oracle card, which was part of our message for the weekend, which was to go into the cave of your heart. But I thought this was particularly interesting because within the cave of the heart here, it seems as though there's a star. And I had a dream once that I was out in outer space, perched on a piece of asteroid, looking at this, like, sitting pretty close up to this huge, almost like blue, white hot star. And there was this presence next to me, and the presence I felt was like God. It was like divine, but it was disembodied. It was abstract. But it was like a being with me. And the being said, that's the star inside, or do you see that star? And I was like, yeah. And the being said, like, that's the star inside of your heart. And so it seems to me that we have a star inside of our heart. And then I discovered later, like years later, when I was like sifting through the Gnostic Gospels, it might have been in the Pistis Sophia or something, but Jesus mentions to the disciples that there's a star inside your heart. So I was thinking about that today, and I was just thinking how it's like as we drop into the heart, it's like this portal that is like a bridge between the infinite and the material, and the non-physical and the physical. It's a bridge between divinity and humanity. And the heart, I feel like, is a portal through space-time as well. I think we can connect to people we love through our heart, whether they're living or not anymore. I think that we can connect from heart to heart and soul to soul through the heart. I think that we can have visions through the heart. We've learned that the heart is an information processor. But the one thing that I wanted to say about the heart being the cave, but the heart also having the star being inside of the heart, is that it almost seems to me that the deeper we go, the further out we get. Like, the deeper we go into our heart, the further out the expansiveness of our consciousness gets. But it's almost like we can travel like deep into our heart and end up like deep in the outer realms or something. It's really pretty crazy. But there was something else. Oh, go back and watch yesterday's video. I talk a lot about it. It had something to do with time travel and this guy named John Teeter, and I'm not going to get in on that tangent again, but it's fun to listen to. So go back and listen to that from yesterday. But I did want to make that point that when we tune into our heart, I feel like the deeper we go, the further out we go. The deeper in we get, the further out we go. It's like the consciousness expands, but we like go, it's like I have this vision of like going deep into a heart and almost like swimming down into the depths, but then like you end up like out in outer space or something. I don't know. Hopefully I can telepathically transmit this like image to you and you'll understand it. Okay, so we finished reading. I did want to point out in my map, before we go and listen, I think it will be helpful to give a visual reference because I kind of talk about this in the audio. So this is the tree of life, and this is the map of reality. It is a glyph of all of the governing forces of the Godhead and the governing forces of reality. And it is a microcosm and a macrocosm of, the macrocosm being the whole of existence as we relate to it within our material realm here. And then the outer realms that interact with our realm. And the microcosm of the human soul, okay? And so it's divided into these like organized sections and categories, but there's 3 columns to this tree. The right column is the column of mercy and wisdom. The left column is the column of judgment. And the central column, the center column there, is the neutral column. And these are sort of like the levels of consciousness, but this is the central column. Think of this kind of like electricity, positive, negative, neutral, or positive, negative, neutral. So these 3 arcs here represent the unmanifest realms. And so this is like beyond, there's no existence anymore up here, right? The first center here is where pure divine almost unformed, uncrystallized energy pushes through into this realm of existence that we have relation to, right? Because once we get up here into non-existence, I think that there's other mysteries happening that I can't fathom and can't interact with. So what I wanted to point out on this is that here we have on the human soul in the comparison, the area that would be the heart chakra. This word Tiferet is the name of this, what's called a Sephiroth. There's like all these words that you're like, what is this? I don't understand what you're saying. So this is one of the governing forces right here. This would be, if we applied this to us, this would be in our heart. This just so happens to be the Christ center, the Christ consciousness, the Messiah, the Redeemer. This energy lives here. So this is the level of consciousness that Jesus of Nazareth was able to live and be in and exist in during his physical manifestation on earth, when he was here as the manifest example of the perfect divine person, also owning their full humanity at the same time. So we see that there is a vertical column here coming up and down. This is the physical reality down here. This is us way down here. This is like the universe, the multiverse, everything that's physical and material. This will be here in Malchut. So everything up here is like abstract, the most abstract level of God in his almost unmanifest form, where you can't even fathom. It's like there's no personality here. It's just pure like energy and essence. And we really can't get up this high, but this is the highest, most elevated level of divinity. And then this is like the Christ consciousness level. We as human beings really can almost only reach up to here in this first level. This is like psychic, astral realm. This is like intuitives. This is prophecy here, or this is on the way to prophecy. But this is where Jesus was at. Jesus had to come here to introduce this level of consciousness into this physical realm. He had to come here physically and kind of like strike that chord, hit that gong, so it could be resounding in this state of being, so that others here could connect with it and attune themselves to that note. Okay? So you see there's this vertical column, and the Christ consciousness connects. It's the bridge between humanity and the divinity up here. Now, all of these energy forces kind of go through Tiferet as like this intersection, this cross section. This is the Messiah happening right here. This is the Redeemer. This is where all of these governing forces are broken down, deconstructed, sacrificed, and brought into balance so that we could bring them in to the way that we interact with humanity. So, just to use this cross for the crucifixion, this up and down here is our connection to divine. The vertical is the connection to the divine. The horizontal is our 3D life, this physical plane. What we want to do is be in the center here in perfect balance, where we can stay connected. We can be in the world but not of it. We can be an open channel and a flow of divine energy, and we can express that through our humanity, right? Through the fullness of our expression here on earth. That's what we're trying to do. What does happen though is sometimes we'll get too caught up in all of the 3D world stuff. And we'll forget and we'll let our connection to this vertical slip. And so when we get all on this horizontal world and we lose connection with the vertical, when we let our spiritual practice go, when we let our discipline go, that's when chaos starts happening. That's when we start feeling dissatisfied. We start feeling anxious and restless and lost, and we're looking for that fulfillment. We're lacking that fulfillment because we're looking for it in the outer world instead of the inner world, in that vertical world, right? So we want to get our sustenance and our light and our energy from this inner realm, from that vertical channel, but we want to take that and apply it to how we connect with people in the outer realm. And in order to do that, we have to maintain these balances. We have to keep this balanced, and it's a discipline. And we have to show up for that spiritual practice, and we have to make time to connect with this vertical energy, with this divine. We have to make time to connect with the divine through the Christ center, through the heart on a daily basis. Because if we don't, then we sort of slip out of alignment and everything starts kind of going to shit, and we become, edgy and snippy and sharp and judgy. And, next thing you know, we could make a bad complaint on Yelp or something and get someone fired. You know what I mean? Like, it just kind of starts getting out of control. So we always want to be disciples, right? Disciples it takes discipline to be a disciple. It's like a process. It's a practice. It's a lifestyle. So we want to stay focused and remember to take time every day in stillness to connect to the divinity that your humanity has come here to experience, and your divinity has come here to experience humanity. So you want to embrace it all, right? And the perfect balance is when we can fully love our humanity and our divinity, and have that divine marriage of the two, where we can be in this world but not of it. We can be walking, with humans as a human, but still be awakened to the divine aspects within us and live as our higher self in this elevated kind of state of being, where, when these things are all in balance, all of this energy and consciousness is flowing. Each of these things are vessels, and the light is what comes and fills the vessels. And when it says the cup is runneth over, what it's talking about is the vessels are running over. The light comes down into these vessels and spills out and goes over to this one, and then that spills out and goes over to this one. It's like a neutral, and then masculine, and then over to feminine, and then the feminine goes over to the masculine again, and each masculine becomes a feminine when it receives, right? So there's this constant dance and this constant beautiful machinery of the universe happening, right? So our cups are running over, and their consciousness is crystallizing into these more specified expressions of itself. It's becoming more refined as it's going through these filters, and the more it's filtered and refined, the more that we are able to connect with it, right? And so the higher up we go, we're able to sort of be able to I won't necessarily say understand the abstract, but kind of you can accept the abstract or absorb it or perceive it a little bit better, I guess you could say. So I think yes, the Messiah corrects, heals, redeems, balances all of these governing forces. We're keeping our vertical channel open. We are keeping the balance of where that meets in the middle. So that, if we're all vertical and we're not horizontal at all, then we're not sharing, right? We're not sharing all the light that we're getting, and we're hoarding it for ourselves, right? So as we receive the light from the vertical, we always want to be sharing it, right? spreading the good news into humanity, spreading the light. But if we also get too caught up and too lost in the horizontal, then we start to wither on the vine, and we need that connection with the vertical, with divine, to maintain our humanity at its most divine, and its most loving, and its most compassionate, and its most understanding. I'll keep remembering to pull out our little chart, because I think the more you see it, the more it starts to make sense, and you start to get a little bit more oriented, I guess you'd say. All right, you guys, this is 25 minutes. I will now let you listen to the audio, and I think that having taken that into account and then listening to the rest of it, hopefully it will all mesh together in a big blender. It's raw, it's real, it's punk. All right, you guys, I will say goodnight now, because I'm just gonna splice the end of this as the audio, and I don't know, it's gonna be Frankenstein together, so it may not be pretty, but we're gonna do it. All right, you guys, good night. I guess I'll see you tomorrow for our weekly Oracle energy forecast for the week. And it might be, you'll probably be watching this Sunday morning, because it's going to be in the middle of the night before this is posted. But I hope y'all have a good one. Bye.
This is a continuation of the Gospel of Philip, the inner and the outer. I'm recording this voice note while I just got out of the shower. I'm getting ready for work, so I'm doing my skin routines. But I wanted to get this information down, so I don't know if I'm going to post this audio or if I'm going to review this audio and talk about these things in the video. But either way, if this is weird, it's because it is. So I was struck that I wanted to still come back and do an episode 5 of the inner and the outer, even though I thought that we were finished, because there have just been continuing themes that have presented themselves to me all week, in the form of, again, podcasts that I've been listening to, and then also just reminders of things that I always forget to talk about that I mean to talk about, and it's all tying in to the subject as we wrap up. And it had to do with what's going on behind the scenes in the crucifixion of the Christ. And so tonight I wanted to talk about, so this is why I want this to be notes, because I want to elaborate it on more later, but these are the talking points. I wanted to talk about the crucifixion, what that is. Jesus had to come here in manifestation as a fully realized divine and human being that we all have potential to become, but Jesus was the cause and not the effect. All the other prophets that had come before then were sort of still effect consciousness, because something caused them to have a revelation. Whereas Jesus, even Mary's pregnancy, nothing physically caused her to get pregnant. It was an angel that impregnated her. And, she was asked first, by the way, and she said yes. So in that regard, she paused, saw her own fear, and still rose to the occasion and said yes, even in the face of ruin and, challenge and all these obstacles, right? So Jesus was cause consciousness when he was born, because even though he was fully human, had all the human emotions, had all of the human experiences, he was a person, but he was able to be fully self-realized as fully divine and fully human in this incarnation without anything causing it to be so. He just was able to maintain the pureness of his being and that full connection. So Jesus, the Christ, Jesus is the physical manifestation of Christ consciousness. And so Christ consciousness dwells in the Sephiroth of Tiferet, which happens to be in the middle of that heart chakra, right? So Jesus lives in our heart. That's why. Because Christ consciousness is the state that we get to. The more that we get into Christ consciousness, the more that we can be connected to the highest realms of elevated consciousness, of elevating our soul, to have affinity with the light, to connect with the divine and with the ultimate divine masculine and feminine energy in marriage, in union, in that sacred union. And so Jesus, the Christ, the heart, then becomes a bridge, a portal. And so, this when Jesus was crucified, he was when in the Old Testament, when they picked a sacrifice, they had to pick the best specimen and the purest and the greatest offering and the most generous, right? And so Jesus was the perfect sacrifice. And what was happening was that when his body was broken open, his energy was released. And Christ consciousness is the redeemer of all of these different higher powers that we can't even access because we're not in attunement with them. So when the Messiah, the redeeming energy is happening, it's taking this cross section of all of these powers that we are challenged with, and it helps correct us. It helps bring us back into alignment. It brings us into balance with judgment and mercy. It redeems us. It saves us. It brings us into, on the tree of life, what is called the central column, when things are in harmony and we have inner peace and we've inherited the peace and the kingdom. And the kingdom is having, all of this peace in heaven on earth within you because you have learned how to utilize and embody the fruits of the Spirit and balance them from vices into virtues. And so you're in vibration with those. So back to the vibrational aspect of it, Jesus, the Christ, Christ, the Messiah, Yeshua, had to come into this world and physically manifest in order to bring the vibration of Christ consciousness into the physical material world, which it hadn't been done yet because every other prophet was building us up to that point, and they were still effect of a cause. So when Jesus was born and lived in this world and made his impact, he was doing things and changing things on different levels. He was changing the zeitgeist of, politics and human interaction and civil rights and, material 3D world issues. He was changing the way that people felt in their emotional realm and teaching them how to master that area and to open their hearts and purify their hearts and to live in a state of love and union and cooperation and giving and sharing. He was doing things on a spiritual, mystical level that we didn't even know, just being here, like I said, attuning the vibration to the energy of Christ consciousness. And so Jesus being crucified on the cross, it was no accident or coincidence that that's how the Romans did it. Jesus was, like I said, he was a bridge, but he's also, think of like an intersection on a freeway. It's going in different directions, right? So the vertical post of the cross it represents our channel, us as a channel, and our connection to divine, right? The horizontal post is representative of how we take that inner healing and transformation and apply that to how we are in union and cooperation, how we express that out into humanity. How do we show up in humanity? How do we contribute? What chord are we striking with the Christ consciousness that is affecting, the rest of the energy of humanity here on earth, right? So the righteous sages and prophets, when they were here, their physical presence was making an impact on the level that other people could aspire to, because something had to come and strike that chord so that it would be resonating, and then others who were in resonation with that chord could then unify and tap in and connect and then be in vibration with that and expand upon that and have revelation and feel like they're in union with it and in a state of wholeness because of it, because they're in alignment with something that is so stable, so true. It just doesn't feel right because we have all of these ego shells and barriers and discordance and dis-ease that's getting in the way. So it becomes about dying to our ego self. That is how we show up and sacrifice. We die to anything that's not truly coming from, love and hope and excitement and goodness in our heart, if it's ego driven and selfish and fear driven and insecure, those are the things that we want to let go of. We want to let die away. When we have prejudices and assumptions about people, and we, have fear and hate and grudges and unforgiveness, and we project, our baggage and bullshit onto other people, that's just that needs to be corrected. It's causing the darkness, right? So we take ownership of ourselves. We take ownership of our lives, about every way we show up as a channel. We want to keep that channel clean so that we can be a beacon for the light, a beacon for goodness, a beacon for Christ consciousness in this world. That is how he will redeem us. But it's like there's everything in the Bible has like 4 levels of truth and meaning and wisdom. There's a surface level truth that applies to the material world, which is where most people get stuck and hung up. And that's why the Bible doesn't seem to make sense. And so then there is like an emotional, heart level aspect to it. And that's kind of where the poetry and the parables come in, right? But then there's like a deeper level. There's like a soul level aspect where it has to do with the path of soul correction in this life. And it's like speaking to that as well, and to spiritual, things. And then there's like this spiritual mystical level that is like, for instance, talking about, okay, well, what's actually happening when the crucifixion is going on, which brings me back to talking about the actual sacrifice. Matter, energy, cannot be created or destroyed. That's the law of conservation of matter, right? It's only reused and transformed and repurposed. So when we sacrifice something, let's say like they did in the Old Testament when they sacrificed animals, what was happening was they were releasing energy from one vessel so that it could be repurposed into another vessel. Meaning they released the energy from a cow by slaughtering it, and they gave that up to spirit to then repurpose into energy, into, I guess, blessings, right? And abundance and correction and payment, basically, for the things that we take energetically that we haven't earned, right? We want to build our vessel and receive the light through earning the light, through putting our heart, soul, mind, and strength in things. And so when Jesus was broken open as the perfect sacrifice in Eucharist, he opened up a portal of energy that opened that bridge of our ability to connect with divine from the lower state of our humanity, where we couldn't have reached that high before. So he saved us, right? So we could go to heaven, or we could live in heaven now on earth. Whether there is a literal heaven in the non-physical, I'm not sure, but I know that there are other realms in the non-physical, but they are experienced in a different way than we experience physical manifestation. It's more of telepathy and energy and whatnot. So don't want to get too off track there. So thy kingdom come, thy will be done, the bride of Christ. We're talking about Christ consciousness and us as the human form coming together in that divine marriage of us accepting and loving ourselves as a human person with all of the shortcomings that we have, and loving ourselves and feeling and knowing that we're whole because we have like the eternal divinity within us and we are equally as divine. And so it's just about our self-realization and our journey to shed all the things that keep us trapped in only our humanity. And we, shed those ego layers and correct those soul, assignments or whatever that we have in this life, so that we can embody like the higher version of ourselves so that we can align with that highest version of ourselves, the perfected version, that's totally connected to divine and feels their divinity alongside their humanity. And it's like they value both and they work in parallel, but they're balanced and they're equal, and they take ownership and domain over their thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and over their life, right? They take ownership and responsibility. They own their choices. They own the things that happen to them, because they know that at the core of it, it's all about the energy and the inner kingdom that they are cultivating from the inside that's being reflected on the outside. So this is when a person has sovereignty, has self-control, when they inherit the kingdom. When they rule, they're ruling and reigning over themselves, okay? So that's another thing that people who are more focused on the outer get confused about this ruling and reigning. Like, they imagine us being in this like kingdom, like Care Bears, and we're like at court, you know, like, and there are plebes around us and we're ruling them in heaven. And that's just not, I don't think that's it. All right, I've got to get ready and get my makeup on. I think that was most of what I wanted to say. Maybe this will be like an introduction. I'll pop on video and finish my thoughts on this. All right, I don't know what's next. Either pause and we'll continue, or goodbye.